Alright, we're going to continue factoring. This time we're going to be looking at factoring trinomials. Trinomials meaning we have three terms. One thing I want to point out about the trinomials that we've been working with is that every single one of these trinomials that we have here have a leading coefficient of 1. In other words, the number in front of the x squared is a 1, which is going to make it a little bit easier for us as far as factoring. We'll take a look at some a little bit later on where we have a 2, a 3, or 4 as our leading coefficient. But for right now, all of the trinomials we'll be working with will have a leading coefficient of 1. Alright, so when we have a leading coefficient of 1 in our trinomial, we can start by writing or setting two sets of parentheses here. Alright, so we're going to multiply two binomials in order to come up with this trinomial. So the first thing is, to get the x squared, we're going to need to multiply an x with another x, because x times x will give us a x squared. That's this part right here. Now we're going to need to figure out two numbers to put in these parentheses next to this x. And we're going to have to play around with some numbers here. So the first thing we're going to do is find some factors of 4. In other words, what numbers can we multiply together to come up with a 4? So I'm going to jot a couple of those down. I'm thinking of 4 times 1. 4 times 1 would give me a 4. And we could also do 2 times 2. 2 times 2 would also give us a 4. What I want are the factors that also add up to the middle term, or the middle number. In this case, that number is a 5. So the two choices I have here are 4 and 1, and 2 and 2. And out of these two choices, the only ones that add up to 5 are 4 and 1. If I add 4 plus a 1, I end up with a 5. Therefore, these are the two numbers I'll be using in my parentheses. A positive 4 and a positive 1. These are my factors of x squared plus 5x plus 4. If I were to multiply those two together using some distributive property or FOIL method, the answer I end up with is a 1x squared plus 5x plus 4. Alright, let's try another one. Let's try number 2. Here we have an x squared plus 5x plus 6, and I want to know what are the factors of this trinomial. Well, again, since we have a leading coefficient of 1, that makes it a little easier for us. We know we need to multiply two binomials together. The first thing we need to do is multiply an x with another x. That's to get this x squared right there. Now comes the tricky part. What is it that goes in those parentheses? So we're going to go out to the side and play around with some numbers. What we're going to do is look for some factors of 6. We got 6 times 1, and we got 2 times 3. Each of these would give me a 6. What I want to know is, out of these two, which are the terms or factors that add up to a 5? In this case, that would be the 2 and 3. 2 plus 3 would give us a 5. Therefore, those are the two numbers I'll be using in my parentheses. Positive 2 and a positive 3. These are my factors of x squared plus 5x plus 6. Again, if I were to multiply those two together, I would end up with an x squared plus 5x plus 6. Let's try one more of those. X squared plus 9x plus 14. So again, I'm going to start off with two sets of parentheses. We know that x times x is going to give me that x squared right there. We're going to play around with some numbers. We need some factors of 14. So we can do 14 times 1. We can do 7 times 2. So these are a couple of different ways to come up with 14. What I want to know are, what are the two numbers that add up to our 9, our middle term? In this case, that would be the 7 and 2. 7 plus 2 add up to a 9. Therefore, those are the two numbers I'm using in my parentheses, the positive 7 and the positive 2. These are my factors of x squared plus 9x plus 14. Alright, let's continue looking at factoring trinomials. Now notice this time we do have some trinomials that have some negatives or minus signs in there. So it's going to be a little trickier on these here. But the process is going to be very similar. So we're going to start off with two sets of parentheses. We're still multiplying two binomials to come up with that trinomial. In order to get the x squared, we still need to multiply x times x. Now here's where it's going to get a little trickier, because now what I have is a negative 6. What I'm looking for are factors of a negative 6. So I'm going to play around with some numbers again. I can do negative 6 times 1. I can do negative 1 times 6. I can do negative 3 times 2. And I can do negative 2 times 3. These are 4 different ways that I can come up with a negative 6. What I want are the factors that also add up to my middle term, or in this case a positive 1. So if I look through my 4 choices here, the only one that's going to add up to a positive 1 would be this right here, a negative 2 and a positive 3. If I add a negative 2 and a positive 3, that adds up to a positive 1. Therefore, these are the two numbers I'll be using, negative 2 and a positive 3. These are my factors of x squared plus 1x minus 6. Again, if I were to multiply those together using distributive property of FOIL, I end up with an x squared plus 1x minus 6. Alright, let's go to number 5, same process. We're going to start by putting 2 sets of parentheses. We know that an x times another x will give me the x squared. Now what I need are some factors of 2. So, in order to get a 2, I can do 2 times 1. But I can also do a negative 2 times a negative 1. Because if I multiply negative 2 times a negative 1, I still get a positive 2. So, this is the only way I can get a positive 2. What I want are the ones that add up to a negative 3, our middle term here. And the only two numbers that are going to add up to a negative 3 are these two numbers right here. So those are the numbers that I'll be using, a negative 2 and a negative 1. These are my factors of x squared minus 3x plus 2. Alright, let's do one more here, number 6. Again, let's start off with 2 sets of parentheses. X times x is going to give me the x squared. Again, we're going to play around with some numbers here. This time I'm looking at that negative 12. We need some factors of negative 12. We can do negative 12 times 1. We can do negative 1 times 12. We can do negative 3 times 4. And we can do negative 4 times 3. So here's a couple of different ways to come up with a negative 12. Not all of them, but a couple of them. What we want to know is, are any of these going to also add up to our middle term, which in this case happens to be a negative 1. So let's go through these and see if any of those will add up to a negative 1. I think I found it. That's these two numbers right here, a negative 4 and a positive 3. If I add those numbers together, they add up to a negative 1. Therefore, these are the two numbers that I'll be using in the parentheses. So these again are called factors. If I multiply those together, I end up with an x squared minus 1x minus 12. So again, this is factoring trinomials with a leading coefficient of 1.